The moment I watched Rich Stone's wife throw his belongings out their second-story window while screaming about finding women's underwear in his car, underwear that wasn't hers, I knew my plan had worked better than I ever imagined. His designer suits scattered across their manicured lawn like expensive confetti while neighbors gathered with phones recording everything. But let me back up because this story doesn't start with Rich's humiliation. It starts with mine. 3 months earlier, I was sitting in my home office debugging code for the thousandth time that week when Christina burst through the door. Not walked in, burst. Her face was that particular shade of red that meant someone was about to pay for something, and I had a sinking feeling it wasn't going to be me. "That son of a bitch fired me," she announced, throwing her purse so hard it knocked over my coffee mug. The hot liquid spread across my desk, seeping toward my laptop. "Wait, what?" I scrambled to save my computer while processing what she'd said. "Fired you? Christina, you've been Employee of the Month 4 times this year. Apparently that doesn't matter when you won't sleep with your boss." The words came out flat, matter of fact, like she was discussing the weather, but I could see her hands shaking. I stopped moving entirely. "What did you just say?" Christina collapsed into the chair across from my desk, finally letting the facade crack. "Rich Stone, our new regional director. He's been making advances for weeks. Today he made it clear that my job depended on how flexible I could be with company policy." She made air quotes, her voice dripping with disgust. Something cold and sharp settled in my chest. "Tell me everything, from the beginning." She took a shaky breath. "It started small. Comments about my appearance during meetings. 'That dress really shows off your assets, Christina.' Always with that creepy smile. Then he started scheduling private meetings in his office with the door closed. 'Why didn't you tell me?' 'Because I thought I could handle it. I thought if I just stayed professional, kept my distance.'" She laughed bitterly. God, I was so naive. I sat back down, forcing myself to stay calm. "What happened today?" "He called me into his office around 4, said he'd been reviewing my performance and was concerned about some discrepancies in my department's numbers. Complete bullshit. My numbers are perfect, and he knows it. Then he stands up, walks around his desk, and leans against it right in front of me." Christina's voice got quieter. He said, "You know, Christina, I really like you. I think you have tremendous potential here. But potential needs nurturing, the right kind of guidance from someone who understands how to help a beautiful woman succeed." I felt my jaw clench. "Please tell me you recorded this." "I tried, but my phone was in my purse across the room." Then he reaches out and touches my arm. "There's a regional conference next month in Chicago. I'll be staying at the Marriott downtown. Perhaps you'd like to join me for dinner, discuss your future with the company?" And I told him I wasn't interested, that I was married and happy and just wanted to do my job. Christina's hands were balled into fists now. That's when his whole demeanor changed. The fake friendly smile disappeared. He said, "That's unfortunate, Christina, because I've been noticing some irregularities in your cash deposits. Some might call them discrepancies. Others might use a harsher word." My blood pressure spiked. "He threatened you with theft accusations?" Gets better. He opens my personnel file, which was already sitting on his desk, so this was clearly planned, and starts reading off these supposed concerns about my performance. All fabricated. Then he leans in close and whispers, "I really hope we can work this out privately. I'd hate for your husband to find out his wife lost her job over something so preventable." I stood up so fast my chair rolled backward and hit the wall. "That piece of shit." "Mike, wait. There's more." Christina's voice was steady now, but I could see the fire building in her eyes. I stood up to leave, and he grabs my wrist. Not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to make his point. "Think about it over the weekend, Christina. Think about what's really important to you, your pride or your paycheck." Did anyone see this happen? Jenny was working late in the next office over. She heard him raise his voice when I told him exactly what he could do with his job offer. Use some words that would make a sailor blush. For the first time since she'd walked in, Christina almost smiled. But that's when he really lost it, started yelling about insubordination and company policy and how I was terminated effective immediately for gross misconduct. I was pacing now, my mind racing. How long has this been going on? 6 weeks, maybe 7, since he transferred from the Phoenix district. Christina pulled out her phone. I did manage to save some of his text messages, though. Want to see? She handed me the phone, and I scrolled through a series of increasingly inappropriate messages. They started innocuous enough. Great job on the seasonal display, but quickly escalated to, you looked especially attractive today, and I can't stop thinking about our conversation. The latest one, sent just 2 hours ago, made my stomach turn. Reconsider my offer. You won't get a better one. This bastard thinks he's untouchable, I muttered, handing the phone back. What do you know about him? Personal life? Background? Married. Wife's name is Patricia. 2 kids in high school. Lives in that fancy development off Maple Street. You know, the one with the golf course. Drives a BMW. Christina was thinking now, her analytical mind kicking in. He's been with the company for 12 years, worked his way up from assistant manager. Always talks about his performance metrics and how he's increased profits at every location he's managed. Any idea how he increased those profits? Funny you should ask. Jenny mentioned that one of the girls from his last district called her last week. Apparently this isn't his first rodeo with the sexual harassment routine, but she also said something weird about inventory discrepancies that got swept under the rug. Interesting. I sat back down, opening my laptop. What was the girl's name? Ashley something. Ashley Martinez, I think. Jenny has her number. Good. We're going to need it. I was already forming a plan, the same methodical approach I used when debugging complex code. Find the problem, trace its origins, and systematically eliminate it. But first, I need to see exactly who we're dealing with. I spent the next 3 hours researching Richard Stone. Social media profiles, public records, business filings, court documents. The man had a digital footprint the size of Texas and an ego to match. His LinkedIn read like a romance novel about retail success, full of testimonials from corporate executives and photos of him receiving awards. But the more I dug, the more interesting things became. Property records showed he'd bought his current house 3 years ago for $600,000. Impressive for a retail manager, even a regional one. His wife's Instagram was a parade of designer handbags, vacation photos from expensive resorts, and jewelry that definitely wasn't bought on a retail salary. Christina, come look at this. I called her over to the computer. What's the average salary for a regional director at your company? 80 to 90,000, maybe 100 if you've been there forever and have great performance metrics. Why? I showed her Patricia Stone's latest Instagram post, a photo of her new Hermes bag with the caption, treating myself. Blessed, watch a retail therapy. That bag cost more than most people make in 6 months, Christina whistled. Where the hell is he getting this kind of money? That's exactly what I intend to find out. I opened a new browser tab. But first, let's call Jenny and get Ashley's number. I have a feeling we're going to find some very interesting patterns. Jenny answered on the second ring, her voice cautious. Christina, I heard what happened. Are you okay? I'm fine, Jen, but I need a favor. That girl from Phoenix who called you about Rich Stone, do you still have her contact information? Ashley? Yeah, hold on. There was a pause, the sound of papers shuffling. Here it is. But Christina, be careful. Ashley was pretty shaken up when she called. Said some things about Rich that, well, let's just say what happened to you wasn't an isolated incident. I took down Ashley's number and called immediately. She answered warily. But when I explained who I was and why I was calling, she opened up quickly. Oh my God, it's happening again, Ashley said. I was afraid of this when I heard he got transferred instead of fired. Look, what happened to your wife? It's exactly what he did to me, and to at least 3 other girls I know of. Ashley, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Besides the harassment, did you ever notice anything strange about store operations? Inventory, cash deposits, anything that seemed off? There was a long pause. You mean the weekend shipments? What weekend shipments? Rich would schedule special inventory deliveries on Sundays when only he and one other manager were in the store. Always said it was to avoid disrupting business during peak hours, but the paperwork never matched the actual merchandise that showed up on the floor. My pulse quickened. What do you mean? The delivery manifest would show expensive electronics, designer clothes, high-end cosmetics, but most of that stuff never made it to the sales floor. When I asked about it, Rich said it was all damaged in shipping and had to be written off as loss. Did you ever see any of this damaged merchandise? That's the thing, no. Rich handled all the damage claims personally. Said corporate required regional director authorization for high-value write-offs. Ashley's voice dropped. But here's what's really weird. I started keeping track of the serial numbers on some of the electronics that supposedly got damaged. Just out of curiosity, you know? And I found 3 of them listed for sale on eBay. Brand new, still in original packaging. Bingo. Ashley, do you remember the eBay seller's name? Rich Finds 2023. I screenshotted the listings because I thought it was such a weird coincidence. Want me to send them to you? Yes, everything you have. Photos, serial numbers, dates, whatever you've got. Within an hour, my email was flooded with evidence. Ashley had been more thorough than I'd hoped. Screenshots of eBay listings, photos of delivery manifests, even recordings of conversations where Rich had instructed her to falsify inventory reports. This son of a bitch has been running a side business selling stolen merchandise, I told Christina, showing her the evidence, and using sexual harassment to keep his employees quiet about it. Christina leaned over my shoulder, studying the screen. Look at this one. That's a 55-inch Samsung TV listed for $1,500. We sell those for $2,200 in the store. And according to Ashley's records, this particular TV was marked as damaged in shipping on the same day Rich listed it for sale. I pulled up another window. But here's the really beautiful part. Rich was too arrogant to cover his tracks properly. I showed Christina the eBay seller profile. Rich Finds 2023 had over 300 positive reviews dating back 8 months. The seller location was listed as Phoenix, Arizona, Rich's previous assignment, and the payment method linked to the account, a PayPal address using richard.stone@dealsogmail.com. He's not even trying to hide it, Christina laughed. What an idiot. Oh, it gets better. I scrolled through more listings. Look at the pattern. Every major holiday, every big sale weekend, there's a surge in his eBay activity. He's been systematically stealing merchandise during high-volume periods when inventory discrepancies would be harder to notice. I spent the rest of the evening building a comprehensive timeline. Rich's eBay sales history cross-referenced with Ashley's records and public corporate earnings reports. The numbers were staggering. Over the past year alone, Rich had probably stolen close to $200,000 worth of merchandise. But the money trail was only part of the story. As I dug deeper into his background, a darker picture emerged. Ashley wasn't his first victim, and she wasn't his last. Through social media detective work and some creative Google searching, I found 2 more women who'd had similar experiences with Rich at previous assignments. One had left retail entirely after her experience. The other had filed a complaint with corporate, only to be told there was insufficient evidence, and subsequently transferred to a store in a different state. Rich, meanwhile, got promoted to regional director. This guy has been using the same playbook for years, I told Christina. Harassment, intimidation, theft, cover-up, promotion. He's got the system figured out. Had the system figured out, Christina corrected, her eyes gleaming with something that looked a lot like vengeance. So what's the plan? I cracked my knuckles and opened a new document. We're going to destroy him, systematically, methodically, and completely. But we're going to do it smart. What do you mean? I mean, we're not going to corporate first. We're not going to the police first. We're going to hit him where it hurts most. His reputation, his marriage, and his bank account. In that order. I outlined the strategy. Phase 1, gather more evidence and find more victims. Phase 2, create maximum public embarrassment. Phase 3, financial ruin. Phase 4, legal consequences. The beauty of this approach, I explained, is that each phase makes the next one more devastating. By the time we're done, he won't just be fired. He'll be unemployable, divorced, broke, and facing criminal charges. Christina was quiet for a long moment. Mike, are you sure about this? I mean, what if it backfires? What if he comes after us? I looked at her seriously. Christina, this man threatened your livelihood because you wouldn't sleep with him. He's done the same thing to at least 4 other women that we know of. He's been stealing from his company for years. He thinks he's untouchable because he's gotten away with it before. I paused. But he made one critical mistake. What's that? He messed with my wife. The next morning I called in sick to work. I had research to do, and it couldn't wait. I started by creating a detailed dossier on Rich Stone. Every social media account, every public record, every piece of information I could find. His wife Patricia was particularly active online, posting daily updates about their lifestyle, their children's activities, even their vacation plans. From her posts, I learned that Rich traveled frequently for work, often staying overnight in hotels in different cities. Patricia seemed proud of his success, frequently bragging about his achievements and the bonuses he earned. She had no idea her husband's bonuses were actually proceeds from stolen merchandise and sexual extortion. I also discovered that Rich was a pillar of his community, or at least he liked people to think so. He served on the board of his children's private school, donated regularly to local charities, and had even been featured in a local business magazine as Retail Professional of the Year 6 months ago. The higher they are, the harder they fall, I muttered, screenshotting the magazine article. My phone rang. Ashley Martinez again. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, she said without preamble, and I realized I forgot to mention something important. What's that? Rich had an assistant. Well, not officially. But there was this girl, Brittany, who worked in customer service but spent a lot of time helping him with special projects. She quit right after I did, and I always wondered why. Do you have her contact information? I do better than that. She called me last night after I posted about Rich on my Facebook. Apparently, she's been waiting for someone to speak up about him. Ashley gave me Brittany's number, and when I called, I hit the jackpot. Rich Stone is a predator, Brittany said immediately, and I can prove it. Brittany had been documenting Rich's behavior for months, partly out of self-preservation, and partly because she suspected he was up to something illegal. She had recordings of him making inappropriate comments, photos of inventory that mysteriously disappeared, and, most damaging of all, evidence that Rich had been falsifying corporate compliance reports. He had me sign documents saying I'd witnessed proper inventory procedures when I knew for a fact the counts were wrong, Brittany explained. I kept copies of everything because I was afraid he'd eventually try to blame me if anyone caught on. What kind of documents? Corporate audit forms, theft prevention reports, employee compliance certifications, all fake. And I can prove they're fake because I have photos of the actual inventory on the same dates Rich claimed everything was accurate. This was even better than I'd hoped. Not only did I have evidence of theft and harassment, but now I had proof of corporate fraud. Rich hadn't just been stealing merchandise. He'd been filing false reports to cover his tracks, which made him liable for federal charges. Brittany, I need you to send me everything you have, and I need you to be prepared to go on record with your story. Already ahead of you, I've been documenting everything in a private blog complete with dates, times, and photos. I'll email you the password. By the end of the week, I had enough evidence to bury Rich Stone 10 times over, but I wanted to be absolutely certain before I made my move. So I reached out to 2 more of his former employees, both of whom confirmed similar patterns of behavior. The picture that emerged was of a man who had perfected a system of abuse. He would identify vulnerable female employees, usually single mothers or women struggling financially, and gradually escalate his advances while simultaneously creating leverage through manufactured performance issues or inventory discrepancies. If they complied with his demands, he would reward them with raises or promotions. If they refused, he would systematically destroy their careers. He's a sociopath, Christina said after I briefed her on my findings. A calculating, manipulative sociopath, which is exactly why we're going to beat him at his own game. Phase 1 of my plan began on a Monday morning. I created a series of anonymous social media accounts and began systematically contacting everyone in Rich's professional and personal network. Not to make accusations, that would come later, but simply to plant seeds of doubt. I sent carefully crafted messages to his colleagues. Hey, just wanted to give you a heads up that I heard some concerning rumors about Rich Stone's management practices. Thought you should know in case it affects your business relationship. To his neighbors, I'm considering moving to your area and heard mixed reviews about the neighborhood. Someone mentioned there were some character concerns about one of the residents on Maple Street, but I can't remember who. Do you know anything about that? To members of his country club. I'm thinking about applying for membership, but a friend warned me about some drama involving one of the current members. Something about inappropriate behavior with employees? Ring any bells? None of these messages made specific accusations. They were just vague enough to be plausibly innocent, while creating exactly the kind of whispered speculation that would make people start paying closer attention to Rich's behavior. Within a week, I could see the effects starting to ripple through his social media presence. Patricia's posts became less frequent and more guarded. Rich's own professional updates took on a defensive tone. He was clearly aware that people were talking, but he couldn't figure out why or what they were saying. Phase 2 launched the following Monday. This time I wasn't subtle. I created a comprehensive website documenting Rich's pattern of harassment and theft. Everything was meticulously researched and footnoted, with audio recordings, photographs, and sworn statements from 4 different victims. I included his eBay sales history, corporate filings that showed discrepancies in his reported numbers, and a detailed timeline of his misconduct. The site was professional, factual, and absolutely devastating. But I didn't just post it and hope people would find it. I made sure they would find it. I sent the link to every person in Rich's professional network: colleagues, supervisors, corporate executives, business partners. I sent it to parents at his children's school, members of his country club, and neighbors in his subdivision. I made sure it was the first result that came up when anyone searched for Richard Stone or Rich Stone online. I also sent copies of all the evidence to the Corporate Compliance Department, the State Attorney General's office, and the IRS. The response was immediate and explosive. Rich's first reaction was to try to have the website taken down, but since everything on it was documented fact, he had no legal recourse. His second reaction was to go on the offensive, sending threatening emails to anyone he suspected might be behind the exposure. This turned out to be a spectacular miscalculation. One of those threatening emails went to Ashley Martinez, who immediately forwarded it to me along with a screenshot. In it, Rich demanded that she cease and desist spreading lies about my character, and threatened to take legal action against anyone participating in this defamation campaign. The email was sent from his corporate account and included threats that could easily be construed as witness intimidation. I forwarded it to all the same people who had received the original website link, along with a note pointing out that Rich's response to allegations of harassment was to harass his accusers. The corporate investigation began 3 days later. Rich was placed on administrative leave pending a full review of the allegations. His access to company systems was revoked, his corporate credit cards were canceled, and he was banned from company property. But the real fireworks started at home. I had been monitoring Patricia Stone's social media activity closely, waiting for the right moment to ensure she learned about her husband's extracurricular activities. The opportunity came when she posted about planning a surprise party for Rich's 46th birthday. I created a fake social media profile for a concerned friend and sent Patricia a private message. "Hi Patricia, I don't know if we've met, but I saw your post about Rich's birthday party and felt like I needed to reach out. I'm not sure if you're aware, but there are some very serious allegations being made about Rich online. I thought you should know before the party in case any of the guests have seen them. I'm so sorry to be the bearer of bad news." I included a link to the website. Patricia's social media activity stopped immediately. No more posts about birthday parties or family activities. No more photos of expensive purchases. Just silence. For 3 days. Then came the explosion I'd been waiting for. It started with Patricia posting a single status update. Sometimes you think you know someone, and then you discover you've been living with a stranger. Within hours, she was posting photos of text message conversations between Rich and various women. Screenshots of his eBay account showing thousands of dollars in sales. Pictures of receipts for hotel rooms and dinners that didn't match his business travel schedule. 22 years of marriage, one post read. 22 years of believing his lies about business trips and late meetings and performance bonuses. 22 years of wondering why he never wanted me to see his phone or his computer. Now I know. The final straw came when Patricia found women's underwear in Rich's car, underwear that belonged to one of his victims. She photographed it, posted it online, and then proceeded to throw every single thing Rich owned out their second-story bedroom window while live streaming the entire event. "This is for every woman you harassed, you piece of garbage," she screamed as his golf clubs hit the driveway. "And this is for stealing from your own company to buy your mistress's gifts." A box of expensive jewelry followed. The video went viral locally within hours. Rich Stone, former retail executive and pillar of the community, watching his life literally scattered across his front yard while his wife documented his humiliation for the entire internet to see. But I wasn't done yet. Phase 3 had always been about financial destruction, and Patricia's divorce filing gave me the perfect opportunity to accelerate that timeline. See, when she filed for divorce, all of Rich's assets became subject to discovery, and discovery in a contentious divorce case is a beautiful thing. Patricia's attorney subpoenaed Rich's financial records going back 5 years. Bank statements, credit card records, tax returns, investment accounts, everything. And when those records were compared to his reported income and the evidence I'd compiled about his theft operation, The picture that emerged was damning. Rich had been living well beyond his legitimate means for years. The house, the cars, the country club membership, his children's private school tuition, all of it paid for with stolen merchandise and extorted sexual favors. He'd created an entire lifestyle built on fraud and intimidation. But here's where it got really interesting. The IRS investigation I'd initiated was running parallel to the divorce proceedings, and they were finding the same discrepancies. Rich had been reporting his legitimate salary on his tax returns while hiding hundreds of thousands of dollars in stolen goods and unreported eBay income. The corporate investigation concluded with Rich's immediate termination for gross misconduct, theft, fraud, and sexual harassment. But the company didn't stop there. They also filed criminal charges for embezzlement and sued him personally for recovery of stolen merchandise and punitive damages. Rich's attempts to fight back only made things worse. He hired an expensive attorney and tried to claim that the allegations against him were part of a coordinated smear campaign by disgruntled former employees. He gave an interview to a local business journal claiming he was the victim of cancel culture and corporate scapegoating. The interview was a disaster. The journalist had done his homework and asked pointed questions about the eBay sales, the falsified corporate reports, and the multiple harassment allegations. Rich's answers were evasive and contradictory, and the final article painted him as exactly what he was, a predator and a thief trying to play the victim. That interview cost him his last remaining supporters. The few colleagues who had initially given him the benefit of the doubt distanced themselves. The charity boards he served on asked for his resignation. Even his own attorney eventually dropped him as a client when Rich couldn't pay his legal fees. The criminal trial was scheduled for 6 months later, but Rich never made it that far. The financial pressure was relentless. Patricia's divorce attorney had frozen all his assets pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. The company's lawsuit had resulted in liens against his property. The IRS had placed additional holds on his accounts for unpaid taxes and penalties. Rich couldn't afford legal representation. He couldn't make his mortgage payments. He couldn't even afford to maintain his car insurance. 3 months after the investigation began, Rich Stone, former regional director, former pillar of the community, former predator, was living in a studio apartment across town, working at a convenience store for minimum wage, and facing federal charges for fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. But the universe wasn't finished with him yet. The convenience store where Rich worked was owned by a family whose daughter had been one of his victims at the Phoenix location. When Maria Gonzalez recognized him during his second week on the job, she couldn't believe her eyes. "You're Rich Stone," she said, her voice a mixture of shock and disgust. "The man who ruined my sister Elena's life." Rich tried to deny it, but Maria had done her research. She knew exactly who he was and what he'd done. And unlike his previous victims, Maria wasn't afraid of him anymore. She was a small business owner with nothing to lose and a family to protect. "Get out," she told him. "Get out of my store and never come back." "You can't fire me without cause," Rich protested. "That's wrongful termination." Maria laughed. "You want to talk about wrongful termination? Let's talk about how you fired my sister for refusing to sleep with you. Get out before I call the police." Rich was unemployed again, and this time word spread quickly through the local retail community. No one would hire him. His reputation had preceded him everywhere he went. He tried to leave town, but his legal troubles followed him. The criminal charges, the civil lawsuits, the IRS investigation, all of it tied him to the jurisdiction where his crimes had been committed. He couldn't run, even if he'd had somewhere to go. The final blow came on a Tuesday morning in late November. Rich was walking out of another failed job interview when he encountered Christina in the parking lot of the office building where she now worked. At a much better job with a company that had recruited her after hearing about how she'd stood up to workplace harassment. "Hello, Rich," she said calmly. "How are things going for you?" Rich looked terrible. His clothes were wrinkled and ill-fitting, his hair was unkempt, and he had the hollow-eyed look of a man who hadn't slept well in months. But when he saw Christina, some of his old arrogance returned. "This is all your fault," he snarled. "You and your husband destroyed my life over nothing, over a simple misunderstanding." Christina smiled. "A misunderstanding? Is that what you're calling sexual harassment and grand theft now?" "I never stole anything," Rich protested, "and I never harassed anyone. I was just trying to help your career. By threatening to fire me if I didn't sleep with you? I never said that. Rich, I have recordings, multiple recordings. And so do 4 other women you helped the same way? Christina's voice was steady, but I could see the anger flashing in her eyes. You're a predator and a thief, and everyone knows it now. You think you've won something here? Rich stepped closer, and for a moment I thought he might actually try to intimidate her physically. You think ruining my life makes you some kind of hero? I think, Christina said quietly, that stopping you from hurting other women makes me someone who did the right thing. And I think the world is a better place with you, powerless and broke, instead of in a position to abuse people. Rich stared at her for a long moment, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. He had nothing left. No job, no money, no reputation, no family, no future. Everything he'd built through years of manipulation and theft was gone. You don't understand, he said finally, his voice breaking. I have children. I have a family. Had, Christina corrected. You had a family, until you chose to throw it all away to play power games with women who just wanted to do their jobs. She turned to walk away, then paused. Oh, and Rich, my husband wanted me to give you a message. What message? Christina smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. He said to tell you that this is what happens when you mess with his family, and that next time you're thinking about hurting someone weaker than you, remember how it felt to be completely powerless. Rich Stone was convicted on 12 federal charges 6 months later: embezzlement, fraud, tax evasion, wire fraud, and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution to his victims and his former employer. Patricia's divorce was finalized while he was awaiting sentencing. She got the house, the kids, and every penny of his legitimate assets. Rich got to keep his federal prison jumpsuit and the knowledge that he'd destroyed everything good in his life because he couldn't keep his hands to himself or his sticky fingers out of the company till. The last I heard, he was serving his sentence in a minimum security facility in Texas, working in the prison laundry for 23 cents an hour. A fitting job for someone who spent years laundering stolen goods through eBay. As for Christina and me, we learned something important through all of this. When someone tries to destroy your family, you don't just defend yourself. You don't just fight back. You systematically dismantle everything they care about, piece by piece, until there's nothing left but the consequences of their own actions. Rich Stone thought he was untouchable. He thought his position, his reputation, and his history of getting away with abuse made him invincible. He thought women like Christina would just quietly accept his behavior because fighting back was too risky, too difficult, too costly. He was wrong. And now, every morning when he wakes up in a federal prison cell, he gets to remember exactly how wrong he was. Some people might say we went too far, that destroying someone's entire life over workplace harassment was excessive. Those people have never had to watch someone they love come home broken and humiliated because a predator with power decided their dignity was negotiable. Justice isn't always about courts and lawyers and official proceedings. Sometimes justice is about making sure that people who hurt others face real consequences for their actions. Sometimes justice is about ensuring that predators learn what it feels like to be powerless, vulnerable, and afraid. Rich Stone learned that lesson the hard way. And every time I drive past that convenience store where he used to work, or see his old house where Patricia and the kids still live, without him, I'm reminded that some battles are worth fighting, no matter how long they take or how much effort they require. Because when someone threatens your family, you don't just fight back, you win.